Hello, my name is Patricia. I'm 62 years old, and what I'm about to tell you still feels like something out of a nightmare. I spent 14 long days trapped in the dark week, filthy, and praying that someone would hear me. Every sound felt like hope and fear mixed together. I counted the hours by the dripping of a pipe, whispering my husband's name, praying he would come home from his work trip to Vancouver before it was too late. When the padlock finally broke, I saw his face, shocked, pale, trembling. His hands shook as he reached for me, his voice breaking. "Who did this to you?" My throat was dry, my body barely able to move, but I forced the words out. "Lily, our daughter." The silence that followed was unbearable. I saw the pain in his eyes, the disbelief, the heartbreak, the rage. And then something inside him changed. His expression hardened, and in that moment, I knew. Nothing would ever be the same again. What had once been our family's safe home had turned into a place of betrayal, and love itself had become dangerous. What happened next would change all our lives forever, and expose a truth darker than anything I could have imagined. But before we go any further, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love reading your messages and seeing where you are. Now, let's go back to the beginning and understand how this story really started. I spent 14 days in the dark. 14 days breathing air that smelled of dust, metal, and the faint sweetness of mildew. I lost track of time after the third sunrise, or maybe it was the fourth. The only light came from the thin crack under the basement door, and sometimes even that disappeared when the house above me fell silent. At first, I screamed until my throat felt like it had been scraped raw. I called for help, for anyone, Stephen, our neighbors, even for Lily. My voice echoed back to me in that cold room, each cry smaller than the last, until I learned that silence was safer. Silence kept the panic from eating me alive. The floor was concrete and damp. I could feel the roughness under my palms as I crawled toward the small bathroom at the corner of the basement. There was a case of bottled water there, and I understood what that meant. She had planned this. My daughter. My Lily. I remember the sound of the padlock, that heavy, deliberate click. It was final, almost ceremonial. I thought she was joking at first, that she'd locked me in by mistake. I called up the stairs, laughing nervously, waiting to hear her laugh back. But the footsteps moved away, slow and calm, as if she were walking out of my life. In those first hours, I waited. I thought maybe she'd realize what she'd done and come back. But as the light under the door faded and the quiet thickened, I started to understand the truth. My own daughter had left me there. The first night, I whispered prayers. I'd been a social worker for 30 years. I'd seen cruelty in all its forms, but nothing prepared me for the kind that wears your child's face. I begged God to help her, to help me forgive whatever this was. But by the third night, forgiveness was an impossible language. My body began to betray me. My knees ached. My stomach cramped, and the smell of my own skin turned sour. I found myself talking to the walls, to the shadows, to Stephen, imagining his voice telling me to hold on, that he'd be home soon. When I slept, I dreamed of the ocean, the one we visited on our anniversary every year. In those dreams, I was free, walking barefoot along the shore, hearing Stephen's laughter behind me. But when I woke, all I heard was the faint hum of the refrigerator upstairs and the sound of my heartbeat echoing in my ears. I tried to keep track of the days by scratching marks on the wall with a nail I'd found near the water heater. 7 marks, 10, 13, but after a while, the lines blurred together. Hunger made me forget the shape of numbers. Sometimes I thought I heard her. A door closing, music playing faintly above me, the creak of footsteps that might have been hers. Once, I heard her talking on the phone. Her voice was bright, careless, like she was living some ordinary day while I was dissolving in the dark below. And then, After what felt like a lifetime, I heard something new, a voice calling my name. Patricia? It was rough, frightened, trembling. Stephen. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it. My mind had created so many illusions by then that I didn't trust what was real. But when I heard the sound of metal scraping against metal, when I saw the faint line of light widen as the padlock broke, I knew it was him. The door swung open and the world flooded in. Light, real light burned my eyes. Stephen stood there, his face pale with horror. "Oh my God!" His voice cracked. Who did this to you?" I tried to speak, but my throat refused at first. My body felt foreign, my mouth dry. The words crawled out of me, thin and fragile. "Lily, our daughter." He froze. For a second, the world stopped moving. Then something inside him broke, something I'd never seen break before. The pain in his eyes was unbearable. And then, just as quickly, it hardened into something else, something dark and still. "Patricia," he whispered, kneeling beside me. "Oh God, Patricia." His hands were shaking as he lifted me from the floor. I was weightless, my legs barely responding. My cheek pressed against his shoulder. I could smell his cologne, faint and familiar, like the scent of safety I'd been starving for. The stairs seemed endless. Every step was a wave of pain, but I clung to him, afraid that if I let go, I'd fall back into that pit forever. When we reached the top, sunlight burst through the kitchen window. It struck my face like fire. I hadn't realized how much I'd forgotten what light felt like. I turned my head away, tears burning my eyes. Stephen was whispering something over and over. "You're safe. You're safe now." But as my vision cleared, I saw movement outside the window. A car pulling into the driveway. Silver. Compact. Familiar. Lily's car. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The engine cut off and I could hear her humming as she stepped out. The same gentle tune she used to sing while we baked cookies together when she was a child. Stephen followed my gaze. His jaw tightened. I felt his grip on me shift, protective and desperate. "She's back," I whispered. He didn't answer. He set me gently on the couch, his eyes never leaving the window. Through the glass, I saw her walking toward the front door, smiling, keys in hand, as if nothing had happened. As if she hadn't left me to die. My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear. Part of me wanted to run, to hide, but another part, a colder, unfamiliar part, wanted her to see me alive. Wanted her to know she had failed. The doorknob turned. For an instant, I thought of the day she was born, the first time I held her, how her tiny fingers wrapped around mine. I had promised her everything then. Safety, love, forgiveness. I had no idea that someday she'd be the one I'd need protection from. The lock clicked, the door opened, and the sunlight framed her silhouette. "Mom?" she said softly, her voice full of feigned surprise. Stephen's body tensed beside me, and I realized in that moment that whatever came next would destroy the life we'd built, or rebuild it into something entirely new. 3 months earlier, my life had a rhythm that felt soft and ordinary, like a song I'd known by heart for years. Mornings in Portland began with the smell of coffee and the sound of rain against the kitchen window. Stephen would kiss my forehead before leaving for the office, and I'd watch the steam rise from my mug, thinking how lucky we were to have built something steady and kind after decades of work and sacrifice. I had retired from social work just a year before, 30 years of sitting across from people whose lives were falling apart, 30 years of listening, of believing that compassion could heal even the deepest wounds. I thought I knew how to recognize pain. I thought I knew how to keep darkness out of my own home. When Lily came back to live with us, she looked small in a way that frightened me. Her eyes were dull, her shoulders drawn inward. Divorce had hollowed her out. I still remember the first night she arrived, suitcase dragging behind her, hair tangled from crying. She stood at the door like a child who didn't know if she was still welcome. "Mom," she whispered, and then she was in my arms, sobbing into my neck. "You're the only one who understands me." I held her tighter. "You're home now, sweetheart. We'll get through this together." The house changed after that. The silence that had once been peaceful filled with the sound of her moving from room to room, her music playing softly. Her laughter when I tried one of her skincare routines, her voice calling out, "Mom, come taste this." While cooking, I told myself it was good to have her here, that maybe she just needed time to heal. Stephen tried to be patient, though I could see the worry behind his easy smile. "You spoil her too much, Pat," he'd say, setting down his briefcase. "You're still treating her like she's 16. "She's been through hell, Stephen," I'd reply, washing the dishes as the evening light turned the kitchen golden. "She just needs support. She needs her mother." He'd come up behind me, kiss my shoulder, and sigh. "I know. Just don't lose yourself trying to save her." But I didn't believe there was danger in love. I thought loving her harder would fix what life had broken. In those weeks, Lily began to rebuild. She said she wanted to start fresh, maybe open a small jewelry business. "Handmade pieces, Mom," she explained one night, excitement flickering in her eyes for the first time in months. "Things that mean something like your old locket, remember? I want to make things that last." Her words filled me with pride. I wanted her to feel capable again, independent. When she asked to use part of our savings just to get started, I barely hesitated. $45,000 felt like a small price for my daughter's future. I told her I trusted her completely. After that, she was always on her laptop, sketching designs, ordering materials, making phone calls. She'd come to me with receipts and stories about suppliers, clients, delays, and dreams. "It's all happening, Mom," she'd say, squeezing my hand across the table. I believed her because that's what mothers do. Every week, small amounts left our account. "Inventory," she'd say. "A marketing consultant. A loan I need to repay." She always had an answer, and it always sounded reasonable. I'd seen real deceit before in my work, parents hiding bruises, husbands denying affairs, but not in her. Never in her. Stephen would look at the statements sometimes, his brow creasing. "She's taking more than you think," he'd warn gently. "Are you keeping track?" "She's fine, Stephen," I'd insist, brushing it off. "She's rebuilding her life. Let her breathe." He'd nod, but I could feel the space growing between his logic and my faith. Still, I didn't question her. She was my child. The day Stephen left for Vancouver, the morning felt almost too still. The sky was low and gray, and the smell of rain was in the air again. He hugged me at the door. "I'll call you tonight," he said. "Promise me you'll rest." I smiled. "I'll be fine. Go make us proud, architect." Lily stood behind me, coffee mug in hand, smiling faintly. "Safe travels, Dad," she said, her tone light but distant. After his car disappeared down the street, she turned to me. "Mom, could you check something in the basement before you start laundry? I think there's a leak near the water heater." Her voice was gentle, sweet as honey. There was nothing unusual about the request. I wiped my hands on a towel, humming as I made my way to the door that led downstairs. "Where exactly?" I asked. "I heard a drip, that's all," she said. "Maybe a loose pipe." I remember the light dimming as I descended the steps, the air growing cooler with each creak of the wooden stairs. The smell of dust and detergent lingered faintly, mixed with the metallic tong of old pipes. I reached the bottom and turned toward the heater, crouching to inspect the floor. That's when I heard it, the sharp, clean sound of the door closing. I froze, looking up, expecting her voice. "Lily?" I called. No answer. Then came the sound that still wakes me at night. A solid, deliberate click. At first, I laughed, thinking she was playing some childish prank. "All right, you got me," I said, rising slowly. "Now open up." Silence. I tried the handle. Didn't move. "Lily?" Still nothing. A chill spread through me as I pounded on the door. Lily, stop this right now. My voice echoed off the cement walls. I heard faint movement upstairs, her footsteps, calm, steady, moving away. That was the moment something inside me shifted. It wasn't fear at first, it was disbelief. My hands trembled as I banged the door again. Lily, I screamed, the name cracking in my throat. What are you doing? Let me out. The only response was the fading sound of her shoes on the hardwood floor. I pressed my ear to the door, waiting, pleading. When I heard the front door open above me and close again, the silence that followed was absolute. I stared at the padlock through the small gap near the hinges, its shadows stretching long across the floor. The weight of it sank into means not just the lock, but what it meant. She had done this. My daughter. My Lily. I sank to the floor, my back against the cold wall, and whispered her name again, softer this time. Lily, please. The air felt heavy, unmoving. I waited for her to come back, to laugh, to say it was a mistake. But she didn't. Upstairs, the world went on, cars passing, rain beginning to fall, and I sat in the basement, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, listening to the first drops hit the windows, not yet understanding that the life I knew had ended the moment that the padlock closed. For the first 2 days, I screamed until my throat burned raw, until the sound turned from human to something animal hoarse, cracking, desperate. My voice ricocheted off the concrete walls, rising through the vents, swallowed by the weight of silence above. I pounded the metal door with both fists, again and again, until the skin tore and blood mixed with dust. I shouted her name, Lily, not as an accusation, but as a plea. I wanted to believe there had been a mistake, some misunderstanding that love could still mend, but the lock didn't move. The footsteps didn't come back. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator upstairs and my own breathing, ragged and uneven. The basement was cold even in late spring. The air smelled of iron, detergent, and forgotten things. There was a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling, flickering as if undecided whether to stay with me. My body ached from the concrete floor, my head heavy from lack of food. There was a small bathroom, barely a mercy and, beside it, a plastic crate of bottled water. It was too deliberate. The realization made my stomach twist. She had planned this. My daughter had planned my imprisonment. I sat on the steps, hugging my knees to my chest, trying to make sense of a world that had suddenly turned inside out. The same hands that I once held as she learned to walk had locked me away. The same girl I'd sung to when storms frightened her now refused to hear me cry. I thought of the nights she'd curl beside me on the couch after her divorce, whispering, "Mom, I don't know what I'd do without you." And now, here I was, learning exactly what I'd do without her. By the 5th day, hope had thinned into something brittle. I'd stopped screaming. My voice was gone. I conserved water and tried not to think about food. I spent hours staring at the walls, following cracks like veins. My mind wandered between memories and hallucinations. Christmas mornings, the smell of cinnamon, her laughter at 10 years old. Sometimes I imagined her unlocking the door, crying, saying it was all a mistake. But then I'd hear her voice through the vents, clear, steady, alive with confidence. "Yes, the house will be mine soon. She signed the papers last week." "No, Stephen doesn't know yet." Her words sliced through me like shards of ice. I pressed my ear to the vent, my pulse hammering. She was talking to someone on the phone, her tone soft, almost giddy. The papers. She'd asked me to sign something the week before Stephen left for Vancouver. I'd been at the kitchen table, glasses perched on my nose, the afternoon light streaming across the pages. "It's just a formality, Mom," she'd said, smiling. "Updating the will, making things simpler, in case something happens." I'd signed without reading, because that's what mothers do, we trust. Now the truth settled like lead in my stomach. Those papers hadn't been about simplifying. They were about ownership, about removing me, taking everything I had built. She hadn't just betrayed me, she had erased me. I spent that night shaking, whispering the same question over and over. Why? 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 But there was no answer. Only the soft vibration of her laughter above, the sound of a life continuing without me. By the 7th day, the smell in the basement had changed. My body was weak, my skin clammy. I rationed water like it was sacred. I tried to sleep, but dreams came heavy and cruel visions of Lily as a little girl reaching for me across a river I could never cross. Sometimes, I woke up calling her name, forgetting where I was, forgetting that love had turned to something unrecognizable. On the 10th day, I looked at my reflection in the small bathroom mirror. My face was gaunt, eyes sunken, lips cracked. The woman staring back at me wasn't the Patricia who had once believed in second chances, who'd spent 30 years helping families heal. That woman, the one who thought love could fix anything, was dying here. And in her place, something else was forming. Someone harder. Someone who would not forgive. I began talking to myself to keep sane. "You will get out," I whispered. "You will survive, and you will make her see." Each word felt like a small act of defiance. I imagined the sound of the padlock breaking, the rush of fresh air, Stephen's face when he found me. I imagined him holding me, telling me it was over, that I was safe. Sometimes I imagined confronting Lily. I'd picture her standing in the doorway, eyes wide, lips trembling, realizing what she'd done. I'd want to ask her, was it worth it? Was the house worth your mother? But then I'd see her expression in my mind, cold, detached, and I knew the answer already. Time dissolved. The days bled into each other. I counted them by the dimming light bulb and the slow, mechanical ticking of the pipes. My mind replayed every choice I'd made as a mother, every sacrifice, every forgiveness. Where had I gone wrong? When had love become a weapon in her hands? On the 14th day, I was lying on the floor, half dreaming, when I heard the sound, the unmistakable grind of a key in the lock. My body froze. I thought at first it was her again, coming to finish what she'd started. But then I heard a voice, trembling, broken. "Patricia? Stephen." When the door opened, the light hit me like an explosion. I squinted, disoriented. He stood there, his face white as chalk, his eyes wide with disbelief. For a moment, he couldn't move. Then he dropped to his knees beside me, pulling me into his arms. I felt his body shaking against mine, his tears mixing with the dirt on my skin. "Who did this?" he whispered. I tried to speak, but my throat was a desert. My lips moved without sound. Finally, I managed a single word. "Lily." He froze. The silence between us was heavier than the darkness I'd lived in. I saw something in his eyes break, a trust, a faith, maybe a part of the world that could never be mended. He held me tighter, as if trying to protect what little was left of us. In that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. The basement hadn't just taken my strength, it had taken my illusions. The mother I'd been was gone. The woman in Stephen's arms wasn't her anymore. She was someone new. Someone who had seen the darkness in her own child's heart and refused to let it consume her. I closed my eyes and let the tears come. They weren't for Lily. They were for the life that had ended and the one that had just begun. Stephen's voice broke through the haze first. "Patricia, stay with me, please." His hands trembled as he held mine, his phone already in the other, thumb shaking over the keypad. I could hear the numbers being punched in 9. 1. I reached up with what little strength I had left and closed my fingers around his wrist. "Wait," I whispered. My voice was little more than gravel and air, but it stopped him. His eyes searched mine, terrified, pleading for a reason not to act. If we call the police now, I said slowly, forcing each word. She run. We need proof. For a moment, he just stared at me like I was someone he didn't recognize. Maybe he was right. The woman sitting on that basement floor wasn't his wife as he'd known her. Something in me had hardened into resolve. Pat. His voice cracked. You've been locked down there for God. 2 weeks. We need to get you to a hospital. I didn't argue. The dizziness was coming in waves now, the edges of the room blurring, his voice echoing. But even through the fog, I clung to one truth. If we didn't move carefully, Lily would vanish with everything we had. Stephen called anyway, and by the time the paramedics arrived, I could barely keep my eyes open. There was a young woman among them, Sarah, her uniform crisp, her expression full of quiet concern. "Ma'am, can you tell me what happened?" she asked softly, checking my pulse. I looked at Stephen, then back at her, forcing a smile through cracked lips. "A terrible accident," I said. "I was checking something in the basement, and the door jammed. My husband was away. It was foolish of me." Sarah's brow furrowed, her eyes flicking between my bruised wrists and the faint outline of the padlock mark on the doorframe. She didn't believe me, but she didn't press either. She wrapped a blanket around me gently, like she knew I was lying for reasons she couldn't yet name. At the hospital, everything smelled of antiseptic and lavender soap. Machines beeped softly around me. The nurse said I was dehydrated, undernourished, lucky to be alive. I nodded, pretending to listen, but my mind was already racing. How much had Lily done? How far had she gone? It didn't take long for her to appear. I heard the commotion before I saw her, the hurried footsteps, the high-pitched cry. Then the door burst open, and there she was, her face red and streaked with tears. "Mom!" she sobbed, rushing to my bedside. "Oh my God, I thought you'd gone to Aunt Carol's in Seattle. I had no idea you were down there." Her performance was flawless, voice trembling, mascara running, the perfect picture of a distraught daughter. I almost admired her. Almost. Stephen stood behind her, arms folded, jaw tight as stone. "Where were you, Lily?" he asked, his tone quiet, even. She looked over her shoulder at him, feigning hurt. "At Melissa's. I've been staying there for 2 weeks. You can call her if you don't believe me. An alibi, polished and ready." I felt my stomach turn. I said nothing. I watched her through half-lidded eyes, my pulse slow but steady. I wondered if she could tell that I knew everything now. The lies, the manipulation, the calculated sweetness. The daughter who once needed my arms to feel safe had turned those same arms into a weapon against me. Stephen didn't speak again. He just stood there, staring at her as if he could see every hidden layer peeling away. For the first time, Lily looked unsettled under his gaze. She shifted in her seat, wringing her hands. That night, while the ward was quiet and the fluorescent lights hummed softly above, I waited until I heard Lily's breathing slow in the chair beside me. She'd insisted on staying overnight, playing the role of the dutiful daughter to perfection. I pretended to drift into sleep, then slowly reached to the phone on my bedside table. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. "Marcus White." A deep voice answered, groggy but familiar. "Marcus," I whispered, my throat still sore. "It's Patricia Henderson." There was a pause. "Patricia? God, it's been what, 10 years? You sound different. What's going on?" I looked toward the chair where Lily slept, her hand curled under her cheek like she used to as a child. The sight almost undid me. "I need a forensic accountant," I said quietly. "Someone discreet, someone I can trust." He hesitated. "This isn't about work, is it?" "No," I said, my voice breaking just slightly. "It's about survival." He didn't ask more. He knew me well enough to recognize the tone of a woman holding herself together with threads. 3 days later, after I was discharged, Marcus called back. His voice was grave. "Patricia, I found something." Stephen was beside me when I opened the email. My hand shook as I scrolled through the report, Line after line of transactions, transfers from our joint savings account to new ones under Lily's name. Then out again, funneled into offshore holdings. $127,000. All gone. My retirement, Stephen's project bonuses, the savings we'd built over 3 decades. But that wasn't what broke me. It was the last page. Attached were copies of documents scanned, notarized, pristine. Property transfer forms. My own signature, clean and deliberate at the bottom, only it wasn't mine. She'd forged me. My name, my home, my life, stolen with the same precision she'd used to steal my trust. I felt my throat close as the words blurred on the screen. Stephen reached for my hand, but I couldn't meet his eyes. I was somewhere else entirely at a kitchen table months earlier, signing papers while my daughter smiled softly beside me. "It's just routine, Mom," she'd said. "Nothing to worry about." I wanted to scream, to tear the papers apart, to turn back time, but there was no undoing what she'd done. I pressed my palms against my face, shaking. "She tried to erase me," I whispered. "She didn't just want my money, Stephen. She wanted my life." He didn't argue. He didn't say, "We'll fix this." She didn't mean it. He just sat beside me, silent and broken, his hand over mine. There were no words for that kind of betrayal. Outside, the sky over Portland was gray and wet, the kind of rain that seeps into everything. I watched it streak the window, each drop like a heartbeat. Somewhere in that rhythm, I felt something shift. I wasn't the woman from before, the trusting mother, the peacekeeper, the one who believed love could cure cruelty. That woman had died in the basement. What rose in her place was quieter, stronger, and infinitely colder. But beneath that coldness, somewhere deep, a spark of purpose burned. I wasn't going to the police yet, not until I had everything: proof, witnesses, records. I wanted justice, not vengeance, and I wanted it done right. As I turned from the window, I caught my reflection in the glass-hollow cheeks, bruised eyes, hair streaked with gray and defiance. I almost didn't recognize her. But for the first time in weeks, I didn't look away. That was the first revelation. My daughter had tried to destroy me, but in doing so, she had given birth to the one person who could finally stop her. I came home from the hospital like an actor hitting my mark, tired, vulnerable, grateful for every hand extended toward me. I practiced the small things on the drive, the soft smile, the wobble in my step, the grateful sigh when Lily fussed over my coat. "Oh, Lily, thank God you're here to take care of me," I said as she helped me to the couch, letting her lead like a child again. Her eyes shone with the exact mixture of relief and entitlement that had become so familiar. She smoothed the blanket over my knees with an almost reverent tenderness, and I let it wash over me because it served a purpose. Stephen watched from the kitchen doorway, his jaw a thin, wired line. The way an architect holds a measuring stick to check if something is straight. He didn't smile. He didn't move. He simply observed, which to him was a form of speech. That night, after Lily had retired to her room to do some laundry, he came and sat beside me on the couch. His hand found mine. It was warm but tentative. "What's the plan, Pat?" he whispered, voice small in the empty living room. "We give her exactly what she wants," I said. The words felt like logic, like a prescription I'd written for myself. "We make her feel safe." He stared at me, disbelieving and relieved in equal measure. "We don't call the police yet," I explained quietly. "She run. We need proof. We need to trap her with what she thinks she's already stolen." Stephen's eyes searched mine for hysteria or whimsy and found only steel. Maybe that's when he started to know that the woman he married had shifted into another kind of strength. The next morning I woke early and let the house believe I was still fragile. I moved slowly, forgetting to tie my slippers, misplacing a glass so Stephen could watch me fumble and then help. At breakfast, I stirred the coffee too long and let a faint tremor quiver over the cup. Lily fussed, smoothing the tablecloth as if her neatness could be an offering to fate. Maybe you should really look at Sunset Valley, Mom, she said between bites, eyes bright. A place with activities, friends, people who can help you. You'll be safer there. I timed my pause, let the idea settle like a pebble into still water. Honey, I said, in the voice I'd used since she was little when coaxing her down from a tantrum after the accident. I just don't feel safe here anymore. Stephen agrees we're selling the house and I'm going to Sunset Valley Senior Living. The words felt foreign and precise, and when I said them, Lily's face changed. Hope curved into something sharp and pleased. Mom, are you sure that's so sudden? She said, the practiced shock of a child who's been given a surprise gift. Yes, sweetheart, I'm sure. And I want you to have the house. You deserve stability after everything you've been through. She hugged me then, long and genuine seeming, and I felt nothing but ice move beneath my skin. It's strange how the body can register truth and still perform the lie. I let her hold me while my mind cataloged her reactions, memorizing the looseness of her voice, the way her eyes lingered on the photographs on the mantel, the ones that would soon be hers. Over the next 3 weeks, I perfected the act. I forgot appointments I had scheduled myself, misread medication labels, complained about noise when there was none. I let my sentences trail off, let my hands tremble when I reached for the phone. I stumbled through conversations, misplacing names and dates. Lily's confidence grew under that care like mold and warm dampness. She began to bring Derek around more often, Derek with the easy smile and the polished shoes, Derek who spoke of portfolios and timelines and scaling up. He was a man who smelled faintly of aftershave and opportunity. He laughed easily at Lily's sharp jokes, uncorked bottles of wine, and leaned back in our living room like he'd already designed the blueprints for his future inside our walls. I learned to listen from the doorway, pretending to rest, while they planned in voices that assumed my absence. Once, while pretending to read in the hall, I heard Derek say, low and confident, "Once the old lady's in the home, we're golden. No mortgage, no liabilities." His words landed in me like hail. I stepped closer as if by accident and pretended to cough, but my hand was already moving. I recorded every syllable on my phone, voice memo glowing quietly in my pocket as evidence. It was a small thing, but it felt like fiber being weaved into a net. Marcus had been a colleague for 30 years, kind, methodical, the kind of man who kept his files in alphabetical order and his conscience visibly tidy. When I called him from the hospital, I spoke in a voice threaded with urgency until he promised to help. He introduced me to Catherine Wu, a lawyer whose reputation preceded her, bitingly intelligent, unafraid to press a case until the other side surrendered. "Patricia," Catherine said on our first call, blunt and steady, "what your daughter did is elder abuse, fraud, and false imprisonment. We can destroy her." The simplicity of the phrasing made me flinch, but it also steadied me. "Not yet," I told Catherine. I could hear the surprise, then a slow, pleased curiosity in her tone. "I want everyone to know. I want it public. I imagine the waves that truth could make, how accusation pressed into open air could prevent another victim from being silenced." Catherine laughed softly, an approving, wicked little sound. "I know just the venue," she said. That night, I sat on the porch and watched the sky over Portland gray and then turn indigo. Stephen came out and settled beside me, and our hands found each other like two people learning how to build again. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, voice small and raw. "About making it public?" "I want her to know the sound of her own undoing," I said. "I want people to see the truth of what she is before she takes another life as casually as she did ours." Stephen's fingers tightened around mine. We had both been betrayed in ways that sought to unmake us, but in plotting our response, we'd found a new intimacy, sharp, purposeful, and honest. In the weeks that followed, as I continued to play the part of the declining mother at dinner and in public, our plans deepened. Marcus dug through ledgers and receipts, tracing routes the money had taken like a gardener following an underground stream. Catherine began laying the legal foundation, patient and exact. I collected voices, neighbors, suppliers, a woman who spoke of a similar pattern Lily had used when she'd been married. Each recorded conversation, each hidden document, each quiet confession from someone else built a scaffolding beneath my fragile act. The trap was not a single snare, but a latticework of careful steps, patience and performance, law and witness. I had once believed that being gentle would save the world. Now I believed that gentleness could be preserved by strategy, that sometimes the kindest thing we do for the people we love is to protect them from those who wear their faces. Catherine sat across from me in her office, a stack of papers spread between us. The blinds were half closed, cutting thin lines of light across her face, and the silence between us felt deliberate, like she was giving me time to breathe before the next storm. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, careful, almost maternal. "Patricia, I have a contact at Channel 8 News. Her name is Rebecca Stone. She's done exposes on elder abuse, inheritance fraud, family exploitation. She's fearless and fierce. She wants to interview you." Live broadcast. The word live lingered in the air, and for a moment I wasn't sure I could breathe. My throat went dry, my palms damp. Catherine studied me, then added softly, "But are you strong enough for that?" I looked at her, then turned to the mirror on the wall. The woman staring back was unfamiliar and yet entirely me. The streaks of gray in my brown hair had deepened, my face thinner, my eyes sharper. The softness that had once defined me, the patient social worker, the forgiving mother, was gone. What remained was something harder, something forged in confinement and betrayal. "I've never been stronger," I said, the words tasting like iron. We set the date for 3 weeks out. That gave me time to heal, to rebuild the strength I'd need, not just for the interview, but for the reckoning that would follow. Catherine would handle logistics, Marcus would continue gathering evidence, and Stephen, my dear, broken Stephen, would play his part in our performance. Those weeks were the strangest of my life. I lived inside a performance that blurred dangerously close to reality. Lily still believed she'd won. She was radiant, planning her new life as mistress of the house I had built with my husband. Every day she brought in new furniture swatches, design catalogs, humming as she measured walls for curtains. "It'll feel brighter in here, Mom," she'd say, touching my shoulder gently. "More you, more me." The irony nearly made me laugh. I played along. I let her move my things into Sunset Valley senior living boxes carefully packed with fake documents Catherine had prepared. I even signed a few papers myself, making sure Lily saw. "I just want you settled, honey," I told her, forcing a tremor into my voice. "It's time for me to rest." She kissed my cheek, her eyes shining with triumph disguised as love. "You're doing the right thing, Mom." Stephen was my quiet anchor through it all. He said little during the day, only watching, always watching. But at night, when the house went still, he'd wrap his arms around me and let the truth spill out between sobs he tried to suppress. "I'm so sorry, Pat," he whispered one night. "I should have seen it. I should have protected you." His remorse cut deeper than my wounds. I touched his face, tracing the lines that time and grief had carved there. "She fooled us both," I murmured. But never again. 2 days before the interview, my phone rang while Stephen was out in the garden. An unknown number. Normally I'd ignore it, but something in me said answer. "Mrs. Henderson?" a voice said, nervous but determined. "This is Amanda, Amanda Cole. I'm Lily's ex-sister-in-law. We've never met, but I think we need to talk." I froze. "How did you get this number?" "Catherine gave it to me. I heard what's happening, and I have information that might help you." Her words came in fragments, trembling around the edges. She told me about Lily's marriage, how charming she'd been at first, how she'd convinced her husband's mother to trust her, to let her handle finances and paperwork. "Within months," Amanda said, Lily had that poor woman isolated. She stopped her friends from visiting. She told everyone the mother was senile. Then she got her to sign over her house. 2 months later, she put her in a care facility. The woman died 6 months after that. Alone. My stomach clenched. That's why they divorced? Amanda hesitated, voice cracking. Yes. My brother couldn't forgive himself for not seeing it sooner. She threatened him with defamation if he talked. I wanted to come forward, but I was scared. She's manipulative, dangerous. The silence that followed was thick, heavy. I could hear Amanda's guilt in every breath, and it mirrored my own. Why now? I asked finally. Because I can't let her do it again, she said, and I can testify if you'll have me. When we hung up, I sat in the quiet for a long time, staring at my reflection in the window. My hands were trembling, but not from fear, from clarity. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was part of a pattern, one that needed to be exposed. Catherine came by that evening. When I told her about Amanda, her eyes widened, then narrowed with resolve. We'll add her to the witness list, she said, her pen already moving across her legal pad. A credible external source, connected to a prior incident, it strengthens your case exponentially. But I wasn't thinking about strategy. I was thinking about the woman Lily had discarded before me, and the others who might have followed if no one stopped her. That night, as I lay in bed beside Stephen, I stared at the ceiling, tracing the familiar water stain that had always resembled a bird in flight. Do you think people can be born without empathy? I whispered. Stephen turned toward me, his face caught in the half-light. I don't know, he said, but I think some people kill it in themselves to survive. I nodded, though my heart ached with the thought. Because if that was true, then my daughter had murdered her own humanity long before she locked me in that basement. The next morning, Catherine called with final details. The interview would be broadcast live, prime time. Rebecca Stone herself would conduct it, an audience of millions. Patricia, this is your chance to tell your truth, Catherine said. Are you ready? I looked out the window. Lily's car was in the driveway, sunlight glinting off its polished hood. She was inside, laughing with Derek over breakfast, planning a future built on my erasure. My chest tightened, but not with fear this time. Yes, I said softly. I'm ready. For the first time in months, I felt something stir inside me. Something fierce, luminous, unbroken. It wasn't vengeance that moved me anymore. It was purpose. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for every mother, every woman who'd ever been silenced in her own home. Every voice dismissed as fragile or confused or hysterical. The reckoning had begun. The day of the interview dawned gray and still, the kind of Portland afternoon that held its breath before rain. By 4 o'clock, I stood outside Channel 8 News, watching my reflection in the mirrored glass of the entrance doors. Catherine's words echoed in my mind. You're not a victim walking in there. You're a witness. She had helped me choose my outfit, a deep blue suit that brought out the cool tone in my eyes and drew attention away from the faint scars on my wrists. The color made me feel grounded, unshakable, as if I were made of water and steel at once. My hair had been freshly trimmed, the silver strands framing my face with quiet dignity. And my makeup was soft but deliberate. A touch of resilience brushed onto tired skin. Inside, the building buzzed with quiet intensity, technicians adjusting lights, journalists moving briskly through hallways, the faint hum of news tickers filling the air. I followed an assistant down a narrow corridor until we reached the green room. The air smelled faintly of coffee and nerves. Rebecca Stone was already there. I recognized her immediately. The calm, assertive journalist with the kind eyes I'd watched on television for years. The one who'd given voice to people like me when no one else would listen. She rose to greet me, extending her hand with genuine warmth. Patricia, she said, her tone gentle but charged with purpose. You understand this goes live at 6? Once we start, there's no stopping it. I understand, I said. My voice surprised me. It didn't tremble. It was low and steady, as though the words came from the center of something newly built inside me. I sat down as Rebecca went over a few details with her producer, but my thoughts were far from the studio. They were with Stephen. By now, he would be pulling into the driveway, greeting Lily with that steady calm he'd perfected in the last few weeks. She believed he was taking her to dinner, her favorite restaurant downtown. She believed I was signing nursing home papers at Sunset Valley. But there was no dinner reservation, no nursing home paperwork. There was only time, just enough for him to keep her home until 6, long enough for her to turn on the evening news and see the truth unfold live. At 5:50, a young producer entered the green room, his face pale, his voice tight. "Mrs. Henderson," he said, "we just got word your daughter found out about the broadcast. She's called the station. She's threatening to sue if we air it." The room tilted slightly, a wave of dizziness washing through me. My pulse quickened, but I forced myself to breathe, slowly, evenly. "She's bluffing," I said, surprised again by the steadiness of my tone. "She has no grounds. We proceed as planned." Rebecca watched me for a long moment, as if weighing my strength against the weight of what we were about to do. Then she reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were warm, steadying. "You're incredibly brave," she said quietly. I shook my head. "No," I whispered. "I'm just done being a victim." The minutes slipped away like sand through glass. Technicians adjusted microphones. Powder was brushed over my cheeks, and the bright studio lights flickered to life. My reflection in the monitor startled me for a moment. It looked like a woman reborn. Not the trembling figure from the basement, but the professional, capable social worker I had once been. The woman who had believed in justice and people's capacity to change. At 5:58, Rebecca and I were led onto the set. The cameras loomed above us like unblinking witnesses. I took my seat beside her, the chair cool beneath me, the lights impossibly bright. A low murmur filled the studio countdown numbers, whispered cues, the shuffle of movement before silence. Rebecca smiled at me, her professionalism wrapping around the moment like a soft frame. "Ready, Patricia?" I met her gaze and nodded. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with release. For so long I had been trapped in that basement, in silence, in shame. Now every beat felt like reclamation. The red light above the camera blinked on. Somewhere across Portland, Lily was sitting on the couch that had once been mine, her wine glass in hand, waiting for the 6 o'clock news to start before heading to dinner. She would be expecting a story about local politics, maybe a weather update, something ordinary and forgettable. Instead, she'd see my face. Rebecca began with her usual calm introduction, her voice steady and familiar. "Good evening, Portland. Tonight we bring you an exclusive story, one of betrayal, courage, and the quiet strength of a survivor. With me is Patricia Henderson, a retired social worker whose case has exposed a deeply personal form of financial and emotional abuse." The camera turned toward me. The light was almost blinding, but I didn't look away. "Patricia," Rebecca said softly, "you've chosen to speak publicly about what happened to you. Why now?" I took a breath, feeling the tremor in my chest but refusing to let it control me. "Because silence protects the abuser," I said, "and for too long, I mistook silence for love." Rebecca nodded gently. "This involved your daughter?" The word daughter pierced through me like a thread pulling at an old wound. "Yes," I said. "My daughter, Lily. She locked me in my basement for 2 weeks, stole my savings, tried to take my home. But this isn't just about her. It's about what happens when we trust the wrong people to love us the right way." I could feel the crew's stillness around us, the way even air seemed to pause. Every word was a blade turned into light. By the time the segment ended, the studio was silent except for the quiet hum of the cameras cooling down. Rebecca reached for my hand again, and I realized tears were streaming down her face. "You did it," she whispered. But my mind was somewhere else. I could almost see Lily's face, shock giving way to fury, disbelief, and finally, fear. The empire she'd built on deceit was beginning to crumble, piece by piece, live for everyone to see. When the lights dimmed, I exhaled for the first time in what felt like years. My body trembled, not from weakness, but from the sheer magnitude of release. Outside, rain began to fall against the studio windows, soft and steady. I stood there for a moment, watching it blur the city lights into streaks of gold and gray. Catherine appeared beside me, silent, her expression unreadable. "It's done," she said. "Yes," I whispered, "but it's only the beginning." Because somewhere across Portland, as thunder rolled in the distance, my daughter was finally facing the truth, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Good evening, I'm Rebecca Stone, and tonight we bring you an exclusive investigation into a case of alleged elder abuse that has shocked our community. Her voice carried that calm, deliberate rhythm of truth-telling, the kind that anchors chaos. The studio lights were bright, and my palms were slick with a nervous sheen I tried to hide beneath folded fingers. Across Oregon, across living rooms, restaurants, quiet kitchens, my face filled screens. I imagined strangers pausing their dinners, forks halfway to their mouths, seeing the image of a 62-year-old woman who had once believed her home was a sanctuary. "With me is Patricia Henderson," Rebecca continued, her tone measured but soft, a retired social worker who spent her career protecting vulnerable people until she became a victim herself. "Patricia, thank you for your courage in speaking with us tonight. Thank you for giving me this platform, Rebecca." My voice came out clear, steadier than I felt. "Patricia, tell us what happened." I took a breath, one that trembled at first but found its rhythm halfway through. 3 months ago, I began, my daughter Lily moved into my home after her divorce. She was heartbroken, fragile, and I thought she needed her mother. I wanted to help her rebuild her life. I glanced briefly toward the camera, the lens stared back, unflinching. I gave her access to our finances, signed documents she told me were routine, and trusted her completely. That trust almost killed me. Rebecca didn't interrupt. She let the silence hold, heavy and sacred, giving my words space to breathe. I continued, my voice threading through pain and composure. I told them about the basement, the 14 days, the echo of the padlock closing above me, the smell of damp concrete and fear, the sound of my own screams dying against walls that no one could hear. The camera captured everything, the tremor in my chin, the flicker of tears I refused to let fall, the fire that replaced them. Behind the cameras, I could see one of the producers lift a hand to her face, dabbing at tears she tried to hide. Another shifted uncomfortably, jaw tight, eyes glossy. Rebecca spoke gently, her professionalism tempered by compassion. "You have evidence?" "Yes," I said. "Extensive evidence. Financial records showing $127,000 stolen, forged signatures, audio recordings, and testimony from others she's hurt." Rebecca turned toward the camera. "We've independently verified Mrs. Henderson's claims. Our investigation confirms the existence of these records, and legal experts have described them as clear indicators of financial exploitation and emotional abuse." Her words carried authority, slicing through doubt like light through fog. Somewhere I imagined Lily frozen in front of the television, her drink forgotten on the table, her reflection fractured in the screen that now displayed her betrayal. Then Rebecca's expression shifted. A flicker of hesitation, the faintest crease between her brows. "Patricia," she said carefully, "before we went live tonight, my team completed additional research into your daughter's financial history. We discovered something else, something we believe you need to know." The air in the studio changed, the hum of machines fading beneath a deeper silence. "Your daughter, Lily," Rebecca said slowly. is currently under investigation by the Portland Police Department for a separate fraud case targeting another elderly woman, 78-year-old Dorothy White. The name struck me like a physical blow. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. Dorothy White? My voice was barely a whisper. Rebecca nodded. Yes. According to police documents, Lily befriended Mrs. White at a community center 6 months ago and convinced her to invest $50,000 in what she called a jewelry startup. It was a fake business. Mrs. White lost her entire retirement savings. I felt the studio spin. The lights blurred, the edges of the set dissolving into a haze. Dorothy White, Marcuse's mother. I could see her face in my memory, kind and frail, her hands always trembling when she poured tea during the social work conferences I used to attend. Marcus had told me she was declining, that she'd been lonely since his father died. And now I understood why Marcus had sounded so heavy over the phone weeks earlier. His voice thick with unspoken grief when I'd first told him what Lily had done to me. Lily hadn't just betrayed me. She was a predator, a serial manipulator who targeted the weak, the trusting, the ones she could most easily deceive. Rebecca's voice broke through the ringing in my ears. Patricia, do you want to take a break? I shook my head slowly. My throat was dry, but I forced the words out. No, people need to hear this. They need to understand how it happens, how charm can disguise cruelty, how love can be weaponized. I looked directly into the camera again. If you have someone in your life who makes you doubt yourself, who isolates you, controls your finances, your choices, please, don't wait until it's too late. Speak up. Get help. I didn't, and it almost cost me everything. My voice cracked then, just slightly, and that single fracture carried more truth than all the composure in the world. Rebecca let the silence sit for a moment before she spoke again. Thank you, Patricia. Your bravery tonight will help others recognize the warning signs and take action. I nodded, unable to speak. My chest felt heavy, but not with shame, with finality. The red light on the camera dimmed. The broadcast ended. Around me, the crew exhaled collectively, the kind of breath that comes after witnessing something sacred and raw. Rebecca turned to me, eyes glistening. I didn't know they'd find that information about Dorothy, she said softly. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault, I replied. Maybe it's what was needed for the truth to come full circle. Catherine appeared from the wings, her expression a mix of pride and sorrow. The police will act fast after this, she murmured. There's no way she can talk her way out now. I nodded, but my mind was far away on Dorothy White, on Marcus, on the fragile web of trust that connected all of us who'd crossed paths with Lily, via. Ache in my chest wasn't just grief for what I'd lost, it was grief for what she had become. Outside the studio, the night air was cool and smelled faintly of rain. I stepped onto the sidewalk, looking up at the darkening sky. Somewhere I imagined police lights flashing against the walls of my old home. I didn't want vengeance anymore. I wanted truth. I wanted closure. As the first raindrops touched my face, I realized something quiet and profound. What had once been humiliation was now liberation. What had once been silence was now a voice that could not be taken from me again. For the first time in months, I lifted my chin toward the rain and let it wash over me. The world felt cold, yes, but also clean. When the interview ended, I could barely stand. The studio lights dimmed, but my heart was still pounding against my ribs, echoing like the last hammer strike on a coffin. My phone lit up with messages, dozens of them, but 3 stood out. Stephen's name appeared first. She saw it. She's screaming. I'm bringing her to the station now. Then Catherine. Police are ready. We have a warrant. And finally Marcus. Patricia, thank you. My mother finally has justice. I read them one by one, my hands trembling, my throat tight with a mix of dread and relief. The air around me thickened. This was it. The moment everything would come to light. The final confrontation. 20 minutes later, the front doors of Channel 8 News slammed open with a sound that cut through every conversation in the lobby. Lily stormed in, her hair wild, her face flushed red with fury and panic. Her voice echoed off the tiled walls. "Where is she? Where's my mother?" Security guards moved in, but Rebecca lifted a hand, calm and certain. "Let her through," she said softly. The cameras were still rolling, though no one spoke of it. It was as if everyone understood that this, more than the interview, was the real story. Lily's eyes found me across the room. She froze for half a second, like she couldn't quite believe I was real. Standing there in my deep blue suit, my posture steady, my face composed. Then she charged forward. "Mom! How could you? I'm your daughter." Her voice cracked, a strange mixture of outrage and disbelief. I could see the tears pooling at the corners of her eyes, but there was no sincerity in them, only fear of exposure. I stood slowly, not flinching, not retreating. My heels clicked softly on the lobby floor, a sound so small and yet so powerful in the silence that had fallen. I faced her directly. "You're right, Lily," I said. My voice was calm, even tender. "You're my daughter, and I loved you more than my own life." The words caught in my throat, because they were still true, despite everything. "But you're also a criminal who tried to erase me." Her face twisted, her lips trembling. "I made mistakes," she shouted, her voice desperate. "I was desperate, Mom. You don't understand what I was going through." "Desperate?" I repeated, my tone sharp as glass. The word burned in my mouth. "You locked me in a basement for 2 weeks. The crowd around us seemed to inhale all at once. You stole from me, forged my signature, and terrorized an elderly woman who thought you were her friend." I could feel the weight of each accusation like stones falling from my chest, freeing me. The sound of cameras clicking in the background was distant, almost ghostly. For the first time, Lily faltered. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I just needed time. I was going to fix it." I shook my head. "You had time. You had love. You had every chance I could give you." I took a step closer. "I gave you everything, Lily. My home, my money, my trust. But the moment you crossed the line from struggling daughter to abuser," my voice broke slightly, "you lost the right to my protection." Her lips parted, as if to argue, but no words came out. The silence between us was heavy, full of all the years we'd lived as mother and daughter. The bedtime stories, the hospital visits, the whispered confessions after heartbreaks. All of it hovered there, trembling in the air like something fragile and dying. Then the side door opened and 2 uniformed officers entered. Their presence was quiet but decisive. "Lily Henderson," one of them said, his voice firm but respectful. "You're under arrest for fraud, elder abuse, false imprisonment, and forgery." Lily turned to them, wild-eyed. "No, no, please. You can't do this." She looked back at me, reaching out as if I could undo everything with a single word. "Mom, please. Tell them it's a misunderstanding. Please." The sound of her pleading tore through me. I could almost feel her as a little girl again, 6 years old, holding a scraped knee, crying because the world had hurt her and only I could fix it. For one impossible second, I wanted to reach out, to comfort her, to make it stop. But then I remembered the smell of the basement, the padlock clicking shut, the taste of fear and dust in my mouth as I screamed her name through the darkness. That image steadied me. I looked at her, really looked, and felt something shift deep inside me. "I spent my whole life believing in second chances," I said quietly. My voice trembled, but I didn't hide it. I believed everyone deserved compassion. "But you taught me something, Lily." I swallowed, tears burning the edges of my eyes. "Some people don't want help. They want victims. She shook her head, sobbing now as the officers took her by the arms. "Mom, I'm sorry. Please, I'm sorry." Her voice cracked, desperate and raw. "Don't let them take me." I closed my eyes, letting the tears fall freely. "You already took everything," I whispered. The officers led her away through the glass doors. The night outside was cool and dark, the air smelling faintly of rain. I stood in the lobby, surrounded by strangers and cameras and echoes of my own past, and I felt an unfamiliar lightness bloom in my chest. For the first time in months, my body wasn't tense with fear. My heart, though bruised and tired, felt like it had space to breathe again. Rebecca approached quietly, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. I nodded. "Yes," I said. "For the first time, I think I am." Outside, I watched the police cars' red and blue lights fade down the street until they disappeared entirely. The world seemed to exhale with me. The building behind me, the bright studio lights, the buzzing cameras, all of it faded into the background. What remained was a quiet certainty I had done the right thing. I had faced my abuser, not as a victim, but as a woman who chose to stand up when the world tried to bury her. As I turned to leave, I caught my reflection in the glass doors. The deep blue suit, the silver in my hair, the faint lines around my eyes, all of it told a story of survival. I didn't see the broken woman from the basement anymore. I saw Patricia Henderson, the woman who refused to be silenced, who had turned her pain into power. When I stepped outside, the air felt fresh against my skin, carrying the scent of wet pavement and the distant hum of city traffic. The night was alive, and so was I. I took a deep breath and whispered to no one in particular, "It's over." And for the first time since the padlock broke, I truly believed it. 6 months later, I stood in a Portland courtroom wearing the same deep blue suit that had once faced the studio lights. It had become more than fabric and thread. It was my armor, a quiet reminder of who I had become and what I had survived. The courtroom smelled faintly of polished wood and rain-soaked coats. Outside, the winter drizzle whispered against the tall windows. Inside, everything was still. Lily sat at the defense table, her hair shorter now, her face pale and hollow. She didn't look up when I entered. The air between us felt heavy, dense, with all the things that could never be said. The trial had been swift, the evidence overwhelming, the witnesses steady. The basement photos, the forged documents, the stolen money trail, even the recordings of her threats. There was no escaping the truth anymore. The judge read the verdict with a calm, unwavering tone. 7 years for elder abuse, fraud, and false imprisonment. Her boyfriend Derek received 3 years for conspiracy. There were no outbursts, no pleas for mercy. Only silence, the kind that feels final. Dorothy White sat beside me, her fragile hand clutching mine. The woman who once lost everything to my daughter's deceit now sat strong and steady, her eyes glistening with tears she didn't bother to hide. When the sentence was read, she leaned close and whispered, "Thank you. You gave me my voice back." I turned to her, my throat thick with emotion. "No," I said softly. "We gave each other strength." When it was over, I didn't look back as the bailiffs led Lily away. The echo of the courtroom doors closing behind her was the sound of an old life ending. Stephen and I didn't return to our old house after that. Too many ghosts lived in its corners, too many memories that breathed through the walls. Instead, we bought a small cottage near the Oregon Costa place filled with light and open doors. The air there was salty and clean, the kind that made you want to start over. Mornings began with the sound of gulls and waves instead of the creak of basement stairs. Stephen would read the newspaper on the porch while I watered the herbs by the kitchen window. The peace felt almost fragile at first, like it could vanish if I exhaled too deeply. But slowly, it settled into something real. I found purpose again when I started a nonprofit called the Padlock Project. The name came to me one night as I lay awake, thinking about how a single lock had once held me captive and how breaking it had set me free. Our mission was simple: to help elderly victims of family fraud rebuild their lives. Marcus joined as co-director, bringing both compassion and fierce determination. Rebecca Stone featured our work on her show, helping us reach those who needed us most. Within months, we'd helped 17 families expose abusive relatives, recover stolen assets, and start over. Each story was a reminder of the same painful truth. Abuse doesn't always come from strangers. It often hides behind familiar smiles. One gray afternoon, while sorting through case files at the office, I received a letter. The handwriting was unmistakable, slanted, rushed, a little desperate. Lily Henderson. My stomach tightened as I turned the envelope in my hands. Stephen, standing beside me, placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Do you want to read it?" he asked. I looked at the seal for a long moment, feeling the weight of all that had passed between us. The mother in me ached to know what she'd written. The survivor in me knew I wasn't ready. I set it aside carefully. "Maybe someday," I said, "but not today." Some people told me later that I should forgive her. Family is family, they'd say, as if those words could erase what had been done. But I'd learned something crucial in the ruins of my old life. Protecting myself wasn't cruelty, it was survival. That evening, I stood on the porch of our cottage, watching the sun melt into the Pacific. The sky glowed in shades of gold and rose, waves catching the last of the light before swallowing it whole. The wind carried the scent of salt and pine, wrapping around me like a promise of peace. Stephen came out quietly, his presence warm behind me. He slipped his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. "You okay, Pat?" he asked. I turned my head and smiled, a real smile this time, not the polite one I'd worn for months. "You know what?" I said. "I really am." For 62 years, I had been the helper, the giver, the one who believed that love could fix anything. I'd built my identity on kindness, on forgiveness, on seeing the best in people, even when it cost me everything. But the woman who emerged from that basement was different. Scarred, yes. Cautious sometimes, but unbroken. I'd learned that kindness without boundaries isn't love, it's surrender. And I would never surrender again. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from one of our newest clients at the Padlock Project. "Patricia, you saved my life. Thank you for showing me I'm worth fighting for." Tears filled my eyes, soft and cleansing. I typed back, "No, you saved yourself. I just held up the mirror so you could see your own strength." The waves crashed against the rocks below, steady and eternal. I thought about how many times I had broken, how many times I had rebuilt. Each scar was a story, each wound a lesson. And in that moment, I understood something profound. Survival isn't about what we endure, it's about what we become after the storm. As the last light faded, I whispered a quiet goodbye to the woman I used to be. The one who lived in fear, who mistook forgiveness for weakness, who thought love meant staying silent. She had served her purpose. She had carried me this far. Now it was time to live differently, to help others unlock their cages, to remind them that healing isn't forgetting. It's reclaiming yourself piece by piece. The night deepened around me, stars emerging one by one like tiny promises in the dark. Stephen squeezed my hand, and I leaned into him, my heart finally still. I had survived. I had rebuilt, and for the first time in years, I was free. If Patricia's story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and follow our journey. Because every story of survival deserves to be heard and every lock can be broken.